What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Pick Six Podcast, CBS Sports Daily NFL Podcast. I'm Will Brinson. I'm your host. It's Wednesday, August 26th. Football is somehow right around the corner, and you have a fantasy draft probably like tonight or maybe tomorrow or this weekend. They're coming up, and we don't know what is happening with any of these NFL teams, but we know that we're going to play fantasy, and we think there's going to be a 16-game season, and optimism is increasing. So let's get ready for football with our fantasy week rolling on. Joining us now for the program, the one, the only, Pat Mayo of the new Mayo Media Network. He has launched his own wildly successful out of the gates YouTube company. Is it YouTube company? What do you call it? Media company?
It's a production company. We have 3 shows right now up on Mayo Media Networks. The Old Cussed Corners, obviously the Pat Mayo Experience, football and golf, daily show, and the Dogger Pass podcast, UFC pick show. So we've got a lot of sports coming at you. I was thinking about dabbling into election betting, but I may have to turn the comment section off on that.
Yeah, you don't want the comments. We actually, Debo showed me some. This is how I know that and people go to just search Mayo Media Network and YouTube. If you listen to this program and you want great content, we talked DFS with Gup yesterday. If you want great DFS content, make sure and subscribe to Mayo Media Network. 2 points about YouTube. One, apparently our Pick Six podcast channel is blowing up because we're getting sexy spam emojis on our videos. That means we've made it. You know, you haven't made it until you're being spammed by fake pictures of half-naked women who are putting banana emojis in your YouTube comments. And 2, I was going to say, I think it's my wife finds this abhorrent and annoying, but I've gotten I live and breathe golf DFS. And so I've found that throughout the week, like Monday through Wednesday, I'll like watch you on my big screen, or like the Awesome guys or whoever else. I'll watch YouTube DFS shows on the big screen and like take notes as I'm going along. And my wife is like, what are you doing? Why are you watching YouTube DFS YouTube talk shows on the screen? I'm like, I'm trying to win that cheddar, girl. Like, what do you need to know? Do you think this is a possible new long-term medium? Like people just watch YouTube shows on their televisions?
I think so. I mean, that's one of the reasons behind it. Like over the past 7 years, I brought my show from audio to video on TV to off TV to online, but still video and audio. Like you can just press one button and it appears on your TV. What's the difference at this point? And if the production value is fine, go for it. It's not just people in their webcam just looking at it anymore. It's people know how to use cameras. So my show is both available, on the Mayo Media Network video, Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast. Like I said, daily shows during football season. There's going to be 10 podcasts a week. I appreciate how all the sports are overlapping into one. I feel like my wife at the same time is going to be like, you've gone insane and you look horrible.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first time, and people have been watching. So on our YouTube channel, basically every single video is me in a hat because I haven't gotten a haircut because my lady's on maternity leave. And long story, with a beard, talking to a microphone. And so I'm actually wearing a collared shirt and have my hair semi-combed because I had to do CBS Sports HQ.
You knew you were talking to me, didn't you? And you knew I would come.
Well, you always dress up. You always look sharp in your YouTube. So I didn't want to look like a sub. No, I mean, I walked downstairs. My wife was like, "What? Are you sleeping around? Why are you? What's with the collared shirt? You haven't worn a collared shirt in 7 months. What are you doing?" But yeah, I mean, it's no. I think it's YouTube TV, which we have. You don't have channels. You just have a list of stuff that you might watch. So if you want to go to YouTube instead, it's wild to me how it's sort of all blended into this big thing thanks to smart TVs. And I do think there is something to be said for, in the future, you don't need to pay for anything. I can get your show for free on YouTube and get DFS advice in golf and certainly in football. So we can't talk golf. I would ask you your picks, but we can't talk golf on this podcast because it is a football show.
We can't. Can I give you 2 names and then we can move on?
Let's do it.
Rory, Adam Scott. Boom.
Ooh. You like Rory this week? Bro, he's playing.
Yeah, because
he had
you know what happens when you play like crap? Your odds become real good all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's 23. It's pretty crazy. And Rory had 5 top 5s before the break.
Yeah, and he had 7 in a row, and he hasn't had a top 10 since.
It's crazy. I'm going with Scottie Scheffler this week.
Oh yeah, take the guy who's not as good as everyone else, but had 2 hot weeks in a row. Yeah.
Oh, I know. I love Scheffler. I ordered his hat. No, I've been on Scheffler for like months, but I just love Scheffler. He's not going to win. I take him like top 5, top 10. But I mean,
well, good luck.
Yeah. I think Rory's a great bet. It's a great contrarian play. And it's like DJ last week. Nobody wanted him. And then he just wins by 11 strokes and goes 30 under. Anyway, it is okay. But maybe they'll give me a golf podcast. So, football. What percentage of your time, et cetera, how do you split it up between best ball, full season fantasy, and like DFS? Like what's sort of your pie chart look like?
So I always find it really strange. Like I talk to some people like, well, I do season-long fantasy football. I can't do gambling. It's like, it's the same stuff. Like they're player props. Like DraftKings is player props, basically, is what you're looking at. Like, what is the prop? Do you think they're going to go over the projected total or under? If they go over, you should probably use that guy. It's the same when you're making your start-sit decisions or betting on player props. Spreads, a little bit different. Game theory and DraftKings, a little bit different. I don't like best ball. I'm just throwing that out there right now. Best ball was only invented as an excuse for fantasy quote-unquote experts, which I am not. I like to talk about fantasy. It's fun. I get to yell. Right. But it's so they can be right on everybody. Oh, I drafted him in the 28th round of my best ball. See, I knew it. It's like, no, you didn't. You know what's fun? Playing against your friends or against a group of people for money, pride, whatever it might be. And then you have to make that decision every single week of starting this guy or this guy. Because you're going to be wrong some of the time. And you're going to be right some of the time. That decision's on you. Best ball takes that fun out of it. I get the appeal of it, especially in a year like this, where we don't know how like the COVID injury report is going to work. And even there could be, if you have guys in a Monday night game, what happens if the Monday night game gets canceled? I actually don't know what happens. In best ball, it wouldn't make a difference because it uses, you don't ever make bench mistakes. I mean, that's fun. It's the fantasy baseballification of football, and I don't like that. There's a reason that no one plays fantasy baseball anymore.
It was hard to get people to play fantasy baseball this year. I opted out. I quit a league and I opted out. I was like, I can't do this anymore.
We and then 20 years.
I think I have 2 leagues, and I don't care about them. I just don't care. It's hard to get into it, and I love baseball. But yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's the season leagues, it's the gambling, and it's the DFS. And I don't do a lot of best ball because it also feels like you're betting on a future with weird odds, maybe, which is why I don't really like it. When you look at how you want to construct your season-long leagues, I drafted a team yesterday for CBSSports.com that was featured on HQ, and Heath Cummings actually blitzed me for it. I went from the 8 spot in PPR: Joe Mixon, Nick Chubb, Odell Beckham, Tyler Lockett. And my theory this year, Pat, is that I want to go running back early. And that because wide receiver is so deep. Do you think there's merit to that? Are you a 0 RB guy this year? What's sort of your general draft strategy in the first couple of rounds?
I never go in with one thing. And I think it really does depend on where you pick. But I think in the first 3 rounds, you just take the best player available. I was actually talking to Jake Seeley from The Athletic on my show about this, that I do think that in a 12-team league, I think my favorite start that you can have is pick 1. Pick 1's a pretty good pick out here. That way you get McCaffrey. And then you don't need to worry about a running back too, in case McCaffrey goes down. But hey, if your first round pick goes down, you're probably not going to win anyway. So you take McCaffrey, and then you live in some crazy world where people do what you're thinking, where, hey, I need to get these running backs. I have to get them. That all of a sudden Kelsey falls to the end of the second round. And then you can double up with Kelsey and Kittle as your second and third round pick. Monopolize the tight end market. Have a tight end and have a flex, be good to go. I just think that is a hilarious way to start your team. And I think it would be pretty optimal, to tell you the truth. Like Kelsey, I think, is the most undervalued, him and Kittle. Because if you were to think of Kelsey as a wide receiver, I mean, he's been the number 1 tight end for the past 4 years. He should realistically be a first-round pick this year. He would be wide receiver number 6, I think, if you projected it all out. But he gets the glory of playing the position where there are no good players. So having him is such an advantage against the field if you're just thinking about relative position value. So I think the most common way to approach your team this year is running back. And if you get one of the first 3 picks, you're probably going to take a running back. Hell, if you get one of the first 5 picks, you might go just rattle them off. You go Christian McCaffrey, then you go Barkley, then you go Elliott. And then I have Michael Thomas at number 4. But if you wanted to go Cook and Dalvin Cook, Dalvin Cook and Alvin Kamara in those 4 or 5 spots, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and argue with you. Like, they make a lot of sense. But Kelce and Davonte Adams, if you can get those guys like the 12-13 turn, that's such a glorious start, because Adams is so much closer to Michael Thomas than Julio, who'd be like the next guy behind him, and that tier of receiver. Like, I would say that there's probably this is probably a bit high, because there's so many receivers. Like 200 receivers that matter in football. But the odds-on favorite to lead the league in targets is Davonte Adams, and I don't think it's particularly close.
You're not an Alan Lazard truther? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, he might be on the field. That's great. Maybe they can run MVS back out there too. Fantastic. I mean, these guys actually have to catch the ball. Adams catches everything. He's their red zone guy. And there's no team like smoke and mirrors their way to a good record, much like the Packers did last year. And that's not to say that they're going to be bad this year, but they might be trailing in a few more games, which means, you can run the wishbone with A.J. Dillon, and you can get Jamal Williams back out there and complement Aaron Jones, but you might have to throw a little bit more. And like Davonte Adams was hurt for half of last year.
Yeah, seriously, no, it's a great point. I have no problem with that. If you go if I go McCaffrey 1, I think this is maybe a little bit different in terms of my strategy too. It's like, and it's all relative to where you're drafting. Like if you have 1, 2, and 3, I'm not just going to take Derrick Henry because he comes back to me. Like I'm not just like I have to have a running back too. No, I mean, I'll make do with Ronald Jones later and pair him with Christian McCaffrey if I have to. I'm like, I'd rather have, Adams, or I'm really high on the Lions this year and Matthew Stafford and Kenny Galladay in particular. I know people. I actually got laughed off a radio the other day because I said I think the Lions can win the division. He's like, "Shut up, get out of here, please leave." But I think like if you Galladay and Davonte Adams, like that pairing for your first 2 wide receivers, along with one of those early running backs, you've got a great start. Are you taking a tight end in the first or the second or third round if you're at that top almost every time, whether it's Kelce or Kittle?
I started 5 in a league 2 weeks ago. They're like the only real one that I've really done so far. I'm waiting until as long as possible to do my draft. I think we're doing my main draft the Wednesday, the night before football actually starts, just to make sure nothing goes wrong. I'm going to stick someone else to put the inputs in because we do this offline, and I don't want to have to do that. I got new shows. But the way that I think about it is number 5, I took Michael Thomas. Then this was in full point PPR. And then at my next pick, I was looking at the board. Like, I really like Miles Sanders. I really like Kenyon Drake. I know that both of them are now banged up. So this was 2 weeks ago, though. And I wanted one of those guys to fall to me. I'd be like, boom, smash. Let's get a running back now. This is great. Both those guys went. And then Kelce was there. I was like, all right, let's go Kelce. So I now have the best wide receiver. I now have the best tight end. So now all of a sudden, my draft strategy is completely changed because kind of like you, I love these mid-tier receivers. If my receiving core could be Galladay, McLaurin, DJ Chark, and then throw on one more, Marvin Jones even though having 2 guys on the same team seems weird, I like both those guys this year from a fantasy standpoint, just because there are so few options in Detroit. But you go Thomas, you go Kelce. I got Galladay in the 3rd round. Like, I still don't have a running back. Like, I ended up taking Le'Veon Bell in the 5th. I don't like Le'Veon Bell, but he's going to get all the touches. So when I started compiling it that way, I decided to continue to go heavy on wide receiver and then start picking up little pieces of running backs along the way. I think one interesting strategy to do is, like, some people like to handcuff. Like, if you take Dalvin Cook, you have to have Alexander Mattison. Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to lose your 1st round pick? What you want to do is take the other people's handcuffs. So if you don't have Dalvin Cook, yes, go take Alexander Mattison. I have Latavius Murray in every draft. I have Chase Edmonds in every draft. I have Damien Harris in every single draft. I mean, Damien Harris just might be the starter in New England for all we know. Who knows what's going on with Sony Michel? He's probably not going to play week 1. He has like degenerative knee syndrome. Like, it means a lot for Todd Gurley, but it doesn't mean a lot for Sony Michel. Give me a break. And people just don't like to trust.
Also, Mike Reese is out there. He's talking about Damien Harris's soft hands. I didn't know Damien Harris had soft hands. I know that
Mike Reese is probably fake news though.
No, but like all these guys are like they showed the numbers. Like Jeff Ho put up like the list. It was like he had more targets than James White and Julian Edelman. Like, give it to me. I took Damien Harris in the 8th round in a draft yesterday. I'll take all the Damien Harris.
Oh, so he's going higher now. I got him like the 14th, like 2 weeks.
No, I got made fun of for doing it. So.
Okay. Well, the buzz is mounting either way. So if you wanted to piece together your team like that, you go, and I ended up with Kyler Murray in that too. I reached on Kyler Murray in the No, I got him in the 6th round, so it turned out to be okay. What I wanted to do, if I wasn't going to get the elite running backs, which I clearly don't have, but you still have to think, like running back, there is a huge advantage to having the good ones versus the mid-tier ones. They scored so many more points. But like McCaffrey scored 7 points a game more than any other running back last year. So take McCaffrey out of the mix. So if you don't get the one pick, you don't have the best player. Even if he regresses by 20%, he's still the highest scoring running back. So if you look at the next gap, it's still only 2 spots on your team. You have to play 2 running backs in most leagues. And then your flex, you can fill up with whoever, the wide receivers. There's 3 of them, so inherently they're more valuable in that way. Tight end, the gap between the top 2 and everyone else is hugely pronounced. That you can piece it together. It's going to make you uncomfortable when you look at your team. It may not be great week 1, and maybe football ends week 2, and it doesn't really matter. But by week 8, let's say Alvin Kamara goes down. I don't want that to happen. I never pray for injury. But you want to put yourself into a fantasy position where you're able to take advantage of that. Latavius Murray's a top 5 running back if Alvin Kamara doesn't exist. So if you can just luck your way, you need luck in fantasy football. To pretend like you don't is crazy. But you want to put yourself in the right position to actually benefit from having good luck. And then the handcuff strategy is the best way to do it. And especially in a year like this where what happens if someone gets COVID-19, I don't actually know what happens. They're out. I saw one report like very early on. It's like they're out for 6 months. Like, well, that doesn't make any sense.
Right. But like, let's say that Alvin Kamara gets COVID-19 in week 15 or week 15 of the NFL season, and he misses weeks 15 and 16. Well, Latavius Murray is winning you the fantasy playoffs if you happen to make it, or maybe he gets. I mean, yeah, I agree. And I think so. For instance, if you draft, to your point about Dalvin Cook, if you draft Dalvin Cook, you don't have to get Alexander Madison. Who you could get is Kareem Hunt. If something happens to Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt is a top 3 running back, and that's how you win the league. Or maybe you don't even get Dalvin Cook, and you got those wide receivers. You grab Kareem Hunt at PPR anyway, and he can supplement your team and be a running back too. And if something happens to Nick Chubb, or if Kareem Hunt is just better, all of a sudden he becomes like an elite player. I mean, there are so many little pieces you can put together. I'm not opposed to that at all. I'm just saying, I think from maybe it's just where I've drafted so far, I feel like the running backs have been safer too. So let me ask you this. I know that Brad Evans he and Peter King wrote draft Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the 1st round. Brad Evans took exception. Where are you at on Clyde Edwards-Helaire right now? How high are you willing to take the rookie in Kansas City?
Early 2nd round, I think actually works. Especially when the moment Damien Williams opted out on the season, it was like, oh boy, here we go. And you have to project out what is going to be the snap share for someone like that. Now they brought in DeAndre Washington, which I kind of like a little bit. He's another one of those guys that if you want to take in like the 15th round, what if something happens to Clyde Edwards-Helaire, or he's just not good, or he doesn't understand the playbook? All of a sudden you inherit a top 10 running back for absolutely no cost. And that's the whole thing behind the late running backs who are the backups. They don't cost anything, so it's not that big of a deal. You emphasize the great players on your roster. I don't know if I would do it. Like if I was put into a situation where I had to draft between Kelsey and Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the 2nd round, I'd really have to think about that, because I just ride Kelsey every single year, and he's great every single year. Sometimes it's nice to have some safety. He's suffering from what I like to call the Marvin Harrison effect, where everyone has actually owned him at this point over the past 5 years, and there's no upside to him anymore. He's already the best. He's not getting any better. But if he just does what he always did, he's going to be awesome. But that's not sexy. Oh, I want to draft Mark Andrews. I think he is going to be the number 1 tight end. Newsflash, he's not. He might be the 3rd best, but that's still not even going to be on the level of the top 2 guys. So there is sort of a flash thing with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I can get this rookie, and if you draft him and he is great, you look around your draft room, you talk smack to your pals and be like, I was right. I was the one who took the chance. You didn't know, you didn't believe, but it has the blow-up potential to go in your face too. Like there are safer options, but you say like Nick Chubb, I would throw Josh Jacobs into that bin. I just don't think they're that great of fantasy players.
So in this draft, and by the way, this has the Clyde Edwards-Helaire factor where you're like, look at me, I'm a genius. Like I've been that guy before. Like 2013, I think it was. I took CJ Spiller 2nd overall, which was just stupid. Right. It was after his like good year. Yeah. I mean, what was that? I was like, this guy's going to turn into a monster. And then of course my team stunk that year. When like this draft we just did, I actually took Chubb in the 2nd round. George Kittle went next and then Kelsey. So I think there is some of that. It's like, well, I know what, like you say, like, I know what Kelsey's going to give me and it's great, but what if Kittle's even better? It's like, why would Kittle be better? His quarterback's not as good. His play caller's not as good. His offense isn't as good. Like, he's probably just not going to be as good.
I agree with you. I have Kittle at number 2, and I do think that they're fairly close to each other,
Sure.
only because you see like the immaculate yards after catch for George Kittle, and then you think about how their team actually lines up. Like for the first 6 weeks of the season, Kittle might be better. Ayuk's already hurt. Debo's probably out for the first 4 to 6 weeks of the season, although now they're saying that he could play week 1. I'm dubious about that. And I just think that there's natural regression coming from San Francisco. Any team that relies on really good defense tends to be somewhat capricious year after year. It's hard to maintain an elite defense. So few teams have done that over the years that despite the fact that nothing has changed, they're just not as good. Like, it happens. So, and I'm not saying like they go from number 2 to number 30 in the league, but a drastic drop from number 2 to the number 9 defense overall, well, you're probably going to have to pass a little bit more on offense. You can't just run the ball over and over. So it does open up a lot for George Kittle, just because I don't know who else is going to be getting the ball, at least from the outset of the season. There's already talk that Jarek might be playing this a lot.
And by the way, this is where you can marry last week's analytics week from this podcast into this week's fantasy week. As Aaron Schatz pointed out on this very podcast and in Football Outsiders, defense is not as consistent year to year as offense is. And so you have to build in some regression on the defensive side of the ball, as Pat points out. We talked about a couple of these guys, and I think Edwards-Helaire fits in as well. Miles Sanders, I'm curious how you look at this second tier running backs. Mixon, Chubb, Austin Eckler, Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, Drake, Sanders, they're all, I think if you gave that list of running backs to 10 different fantasy analysts, you'd probably get 10 different lists back. And let's assume that Sanders and Drake are eventually healthy and ready to go, because I think that's tough and it's a fluid situation. And, you know, look, if Drake's in a walking boot in a week, I mean, you're not taking him in the second round. He's going to fall to the 5th round. But I'm just curious how you sort of slot those guys out and what you look at, who you'd be targeting out of that group.
So you're right. I kind of sway back and forth on it all the time. I have an affinity for Sanders and Kenyon Drake. I just think that the upside, the volume with all of these guys is key, but the injuries kind of scare me right now. Would I want to spend the 7th pick overall on these guys? Because that's generally where you're going to have to take them. Because it's easy to say like, oh, you can get them in the 2nd round. Well, if you pick 5th overall, they're not making it back to you in the 2nd round. So you either take them then or you don't take them at all. And that's where the Clyde Edwards-Helaire thing really gets kind of dicey, because if you say like pick 9th, will he make it back to you in the 2nd round? Maybe is the question. Probably not is the answer. So then you're reaching on him and you've bought up all of his upside. But if you think he's going to be good, go for it. I think Mixon's pretty safe, to tell you the truth. I like Mixon a lot. He gets involved in the passing game. I think this offense is going to be better. The defense still isn't great, so they're going to be down. They'll probably have to pass a little bit more. But all you really want to do is have a running back who does all 3 facets of what prevails in fantasy football. Is he the primary ball handler on the ground? Check. Is he the primary pass catcher out of the backfield? Check. Does he get goal line carries? Check. If they hit those 3 things, they're an elite running back. That's why Chubbs and Jacob aren't.
Yeah, Jacob's thing with the catching. Now, there is a rumor out there that John Gruden is so mad that Kyler Murray won Rookie of the Year that he wants to, like, give Josh Jacobs 400 carries this year. I don't know if
he can have all the carries he wants. That means they're going to be running the ball when they're down 25. Fun. But all they've done in the offseason was go pick up little guys out of the backfield that can catch. Like, that's been their entire strategy, both in the free agent market and in the draft.
That's a fair point. I mean, especially if you're in a PPR league, if this guy's gonna be playing 2 downs and running 3 yards per time, and you're hoping the Raiders get some good opponents in the middle of the year and he can run the ball well, like, it didn't look like he was going to have a monster season out of the gate. I didn't think that Austin Eckler is a little bit safer than people give him credit for, but I am concerned that the Chargers offense is just good. Like, you can get the Chargers offensive players for nothing. Nobody wants them. Nobody wants to get near them, because they're so scared of what Anthony Lynn has cooked up with this Tyrod Taylor thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, Tyrod actually isn't a terrible pick. He's probably a better like DraftKings play for the first few weeks because he's going to be super cheap and he runs. So the 2 things you have to parse out for the Chargers offense is, what does Tyrod do well? He's basically a game manager when you really think about it. And he throws a really nice deep ball. I was excited for Mike Williams before the guy broke his shoulder and probably isn't going to play week 1. But Keenan Allen remains one of the most undervalued players overall. The problem with Eckler is he's a great player. Can he sustain a full workload on the ground? Maybe. Is he going to get that opportunity? I don't know. It could be Jackson. It could be Joshua Kelly mixing in, like, even if one of them mixes in 40% of the time. Now,
Right.
if it was Phillip Rivers at quarterback, that would be fine with Eckler playing 60% because he would have 8 carries per game and 20 catches per game. But Tyrod doesn't check down to the running backs like Phillip Rivers does. Like, that was such an essential part of their fantasy value. Like, I think he's properly priced, and I think he does come with some pretty decent upside. But I would actually just go look to other situations. It's like the same reason people are drafting Melvin Gordon so highly. Newsflash, Melvin Gordon sucks. You know who's good? Phillip Lindsay. He's good. So draft Phillip Lindsay in the 9th round instead of drafting Melvin Gordon in the 3rd round. Lindsay might even be the starter by the time the season comes around because Melvin Gordon makes no one miss. And his fantasy value was tied up in blood dumps from Phillip Rivers. So the Colts running backs, if you can parse out that situation, all of a sudden, maybe Taylor. Everyone pointed to Nyheim Hines the moment Rivers went to the Colts, but someone like Jonathan Taylor, like, he's going as a starter right now. We don't know what the actual role between him, Hines, and Mack is actually going to be. But if he can play 60% of the snaps and get the goal line, even if he cedes some of the workload on the ground to Marlon Mack, if he is the one catching passes between the top 2, and Hines is going to get his either way in specialty roles, that he could be someone who, like, when we look at it next year, is where Josh Jacobs is right now.
Yeah, I think next year Taylor will be a pick in the first 2 rounds. My concern with Taylor, and this applies to DeAndre Swift and J.K. Dobbins and really any rookie, maybe except A.J. Dillon for some reason, is that in this shortened offseason, I don't know. I feel like the Lions will want to use DeAndre Swift and the Colts will want to use Jonathan Taylor. But, like, let's say that you have a brand new car in the garage, and you have an older car that somebody's going to come take away from you in a week.
I run a YouTube channel. Why do you think I have a new car? Come on now.
That's true, right? I have 2
I
old
can't
cars,
relate to your example.
I can't either. I have 2. I have old cars. Anyway, my point being, it's a great point, man. My point being is that, like, are the Colts more likely to just feed Jonathan Taylor early or to run Marlon Mack into the ground out of the gate? And I think it's the latter. Like, I feel like Mack and Kerryon Johnson and, you know, any of these running backs who are just being tossed aside, Phillip Lindsay, the established veterans with their teams are better values than people believe because they're going to get a lot of carries early on.
Maybe, but you are playing for, like, anyone who held on to Miles Sanders all last season, who was wise to bench him until he actually showed something. All of a sudden, he won you a fantasy championship. If he had stuck around, Taylor might be in the same thing. I don't see Swift that way. The Lions backfield, like, everyone gets frustrated with the Patriots backfield because you never know who's going to be up there. The Lions are like that, but crappier.
That's fair. I mean, they're not good, or I think they're going to be good, but, like, they don't. I don't know. I'm not buying a ton of Kerryon because I'm just a little worried that there's a reason why they drafted Swift where they did, and they don't believe in him. I feel like Mac's a little bit different because he's actually had success for the Colts, and they've got a better offensive line, and we know that they'll feature the ground game. So I guess I'm out on Kerryon, in on Mac. I just don't know if I want to spend what it costs to get Jonathan Taylor. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk more fantasy with Pat Mayo. Okay, so we talked about the running backs. What about wide receivers? When you look at these wide receivers in this draft, this feels like the deepest wide receiver draft, fantasy draft that I've ever seen. And I don't know if it's because the value of so many guys has been dinged up lately, or whether it's, you know, we're just in nickel, you know, we're in 3 wide receiver sets 60% of the time. And so many guys have value. As you pointed out earlier, 200 plus guys can be featured. Are you more likely this year, Pat, to take a look at somebody who would be, quote unquote, making the leap, and maybe that's a Calvin Ridley type of guy, or are you more likely to invest in someone who you've seen have success, but is a buy low, like an Odell Beckham or a Juju Smith-Schuster?
Juju, I could see. So almost like I said, if you want to get a running back, and the best way to predict that is their involvement. What is their touch rate? What is their snap rate? Are they going to be on the field? Like, fantasy, a lot of the time, doesn't really have anything to do with how good players are. It's about the opportunity that they receive. And I think a lot of people, like real football people, you know the people I'm talking about.
Pete Prisco.
Yeah, like they can evaluate talent like they were running a real team. That's awesome. That has almost nothing to do with fantasy. You can say, oh, this backup, you know, he's going to make an impact because he's so good. It's like, yeah, well, he may never see the field. Not good for my fantasy team. I want the guy touching the ball 25 times a game. So in terms of fantasy, I'm looking at market share for wide receivers. How often are they getting the ball on their own team, and do they play in a high pace or high passing volume offense? So someone like, let's say, the Packers. I mean, they are by design wanting to run the ball more than almost any other team, a lot like the Titans are. But Davonte Adams is going to see like a 35% market share on that team of targets, maybe more, depending on how the situation goes there, meaning that he's going to have like 150 to 180 targets. Therefore, he is awesome. Someone like A.J. Brown in a team that's probably going to throw less unless the Titans are bad and fall behind, which I don't expect that they will. A lot of close games, a lot of running. Can he sustain the efficiency that he put up last year? I would say no, depending on where he's going. Like he's going as a top like 15-ish receiver. That's a tough sell for me when guys like you mentioned, like Beckham or Juju, are going later. But even I look at the Beckham situation, you know, who has the same market share as him? Jarvis Landry, who, yes, may be a bit banged up, but is going double the amount of rounds after he is and has outperformed him since being in Cleveland. Like when you just look at pure market share. And generally it doesn't happen with a lot of teams. Like Crabtree and Amari Cooper, when they were both in Oakland with Derek Carr, Derek Carr kind of trash, but those guys accounted for over 60% of the market share. Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders, when they were both in Denver, exactly the same thing. Therefore, it could be feasible to have them. That's why I like Marvin Jones and Kenny Golladay this year. Maybe Hawkinson gets worked in more. They don't really have a guy to throw to out of the backfield. Maybe Amendola gets like 4 or 5 a game. But those are the two guys that are going to be doing the most of the damage and getting the targets from Matthew Stafford. So when you're projecting out forward, you can say talent. That's fantastic. This guy is so good. And sometimes that works out. But is there a situation you can put yourself in where you look at it and say, this team is not only going to be bad and throwing 600 times this year, this is the only guy they got. So they got to throw to him. Terry McLaurin's that guy. Terry McLaurin might have 200 targets this year.
And he's a stud. Last year was not a fluke. Terry McLaurin is an absolute monster. And I actually think that Dwayne Haskins was better than people think last year. Like that's the reason nobody wants to invest in Terry McLaurin, is the fear of Dwayne Haskins being terrible. But he was actually he wasn't good.
He was fine.
You could see the talent. I mean, he's in a Bill Callahan, let's bleed the clock and get the bleep out of here offense. I mean, it's going to be difficult for anybody to be good when they're turning around and handing to Adrian Peterson and trying to melt, it's like a 4 corners offense in football. So yeah, I mean, I agree. Like Terry McLaurin. So in other words, you're not even worried about whether it's a buy low or a breakout guy. You'd much rather just get the opportunity and go get that guy, is what you're saying. Yeah.
So 3 guys I have ranked over Mike Evans right now.
Ooh.
Which Mike Evans, Tampa's so good. Tampa's probably going to suck, by the way.
It is a little easy to pencil them in for 10 points.
It's a little like the Browns last year, isn't it? Like, oh, they're so good. Look at all these players. Look at all this talent. Yeah, well, maybe they're not good. Maybe their defense still stinks.
Well, it was a good running defense.
Great. It's 2020.
That's fair. But I just have a hard time fading Tom Brady. But he doesn't have Bill Belichick now. Like, who would you rather invest in from a fantasy perspective?
Cam.
Cam than Brady?
Yeah, for sure. Don't take statue running backs. Take running. Look at who the best running backs are in fantasy. All the guys who run. It's not. There's a reason for that. So, even someone like Jameis last year, who was an excellent fantasy quarterback, despite 30 picks, doesn't really matter. It's fantasy. Real life, that sucks. Fantasy, right. That's good. But what else was he doing? He'd have these weird games where he'd have 41 rushing yards. So you get -1 for a pick, but +1 for every 10 yards that you run, and 4 points for a passing touchdown in most spots. So if you run for 40 yards in a game, that's the equivalent of a passing touchdown.
Right.
You have to equate that in your mind.
It's why Ryan Fitzpatrick was a viable starting quarterback in fantasy last year, because somehow he was the leading rusher for the Miami Dolphins in 2020, or 2019, excuse me, which feels like a 2020 stat. The idea, Ryan Fitzpatrick led the Dolphins in rushing. But yeah, I mean, if you can supplement your quarterback statistics with a few extra, 4 to 5 points per week, I mean, that's enormous. That's 1 to 2 wins over the course of the season.
Yeah, especially when you think about it are these designed runs, or is it just, Aaron Rodgers broke off a 45-yard run one game because, he just rolled out, no one was there, and he took off. That's not a designed play. That's something that happened. But you see a lot of these quarterbacks have designed running plays. That's why I love Kyler so much. Yes, he's behind Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes, but he could be the number 1 quarterback this year. That's not out of the realm of possibility with that pace.
I've been screaming that for months. I think it's entirely possible.
And if he runs more and there's more design in his run, so he's like averaging 6, 7, 8 rushes per game, yeah, he'll have the weeks where he's like 6 for 13 and nothing's really going on. But he's going to have the weeks where he's like 9 for 99 on the ground. And if he has the potential to score on the ground, a rushing touchdown's worth 6, passing touchdowns worth 4, that's just 4 points. So, I mean, I hear that's the goal of fantasy, score the most theoretical points possible. But
Mike Evans, yes.
Mike Evans, I have at 29 overall, not a receiver, just overall. He's a fine pick. But I have DJ Chark ahead of him. I have Terry McLaurin ahead of him, and I have Adam Thielen ahead of him. I also have Robert Woods inside the top 5, or inside the top 7 at receiver this year. Guy never comes off the field. You know who does? Cooper Kupp.
Robert Woods is what were we talking about? We're talking about like just like he's like nobody wants him. It's not Travis Kelce because Kelsey's the number 1 tight end, but it's like every year Robert Woods has big numbers for the Rams, and he produces, and he moves the chains, and he's their most, the consistent receiver, and he's constantly has tons of targets, and everybody's like, but he does. Can he be the number 1 wide receiver? Like, it doesn't need to be the number 1 wide receiver. He needs to be a top 14 or a top 12 wide receiver, and then all of a sudden you get another guy, and you've got 2 number 1 wide receivers. That's what you want. You need somebody with some consistency week to week, and he has that. He's just a target monster.
So all of those guys that I just mentioned are basically going at Thielen's going the highest. He's like mid round 3, end of round 3. Everyone's going after that. So if you did want to do your start and even potentially go running back, Travis Kelce, and then 4 of those receivers, your team's going to be amazing. Like Chark, who is he competing with targets for? A rookie in D.D. Westbrook? Okay, pass. So it's going to be DJ Chark. And by the way, you want to here's I don't know how hot this take is, but Minshew is going to outscore Tom Brady in fantasy this year. Just like I kept saying that Josh Allen would outscore everyone last year. And I can't on every team in the last round. They're like, Josh Allen sucks. Yeah, he's not a great quarterback. What does he do? Call his own number from the 1.
No, it's true. And Minshew's thing is he's very mobile, like underratedly mobile. He's gonna move around a ton. He's gonna, he's gonna throw the ball a bunch because the Jaguars, there's this, a lot of time you can play into perception too. Like I think there's a perception that the Jaguars defense is good because it's been good for a long time. It's going to be bad. They're going to be terrible on defense. Yeah.
It might be the worst in the
league. Minshew's going to have to throw the ball 550 times. He's going to run the ball a bunch. He's going to be trying to lead comebacks. He's feisty. He can he makes plays. And Chark and Minshew is a great stack, especially like early on in the season in DFS. And I think for sure, like during the regular season, like I don't know if I'm drafting Minshew as my QB1, but the idea of like going with Cam and Minshew is kind of intriguing because you don't have to pay at all for a quarterback.
No, and it's not like Cam's going highly either. Like Minshew is just being undrafted in most spots. So it just if you pick a position to save the money at and save draft capital at, everyone knows it's quarterback. Just wait till the end, pick someone up. Like the differentiation between like Lamar and Mahomes is one thing, and I do think that Murray could join them. Like the gap between those guys and everyone else, even the good players, like the drop from like Dak to Cam Newton, and that's like a 12-round difference in where they're being drafted is like 2 points a game.
Right, and that's assuming that everything goes right with. Like Dak does have the upside to be the number 1 quarterback, I think, because their defense could stink. But Cam does too. Like, what if he just runs the ball what if he gets the ball every time they're in the red zone and just ends up scoring 15 rushing touchdowns? He would probably be the quarterback 1.
Yeah, and I see Dak. I see the Dallas offense a lot like the Chiefs offense, where Mahomes was running more in the playoffs. I don't think you're going to see him run a ton. But Dak, almost like Josh Allen, like inside the 10, he calls his own number a lot to get in. Not necessarily like goal line sneaks, but like from the 6-yard line, nothing's happening. Boom, QB draw up the middle, no one's covering it. The teams eventually have to adjust to that, knowing that that's going to be coming. So a lot of his rushing stats are predicated on touchdowns. I want to see volume. Because the more volume you get, the more opportunities you're going to have to do it. So that's the only thing that worries me. The problem is Dak can throw for 5,000 yards with these receivers. So I like Dak enough, but once you get to that point of the draft, you're picking between 4 guys. You have the top 2, then you have Kyler, you have Dak, Deshaun, and Russell Wilson are all on that next tier of guys. So you pick your poison with those. I think they're all 4 fine options. Kyler would be the only one I would be willing to spend that kind of draft capital on. If I don't get one of those guys, it's Cam. It's Minshew. It's Daniel Jones. These type of guys who are going to run a bunch, to be perfectly honest with you.
All right. How are you going to handle? So again, we're recording this on Tuesday, August 25th. You're listening to it on August 26th. Football starts in somehow like 14 days, 15 days. It's kind of here. How are you going to handle training camp buzz? Because we talked about Damien Harris, like it's building up a little bit, but it doesn't feel like training camp and preseason buzz, which usually has a massive impact on ADP and draft slots, is going to have nearly the same impact that it has in the years past. Now, maybe that's because the coverage is just different with the COVID-19 restrictions. I also tend to think that a lot of people are still watching basketball and baseball and golf, and so they're not fully checked in to the NFL. Like usually it's just NFL training camp and that's it. That's your lead up in August. That's all you're focusing on. Now it feels like it's like, all right, you could watch NFL Network training camp live, or you could watch an NBA playoff game. I mean, I feel like there's some sort of distraction there. How are you going to handle trying to monitor news that comes out of training camp and adjust sort of your rankings and your draft stuff?
I'm just focusing on injuries right now. Who's actually injured, and move them down. Any sort of like you talk about the Damien Harris stuff. I envision the path for Damien Harris and how it works out for him. And if there's good reports to go along with, that'll probably inflate his ADP just a little bit. But I think that's encouraging news. I like the guy anyway. Unless there's some sort of substantial report like this guy is starting now and this guy is not, and that has been made clear, which never happens, that it's all just conjecture, that people want stuff to talk about. And listen, I'm not a reporter. I'm someone who yells at a camera into a microphone for a living. I'm more like Skip Bayless than I am an actual legitimate reporter. But these reporters are
whoa. Let's not say things about ourselves we can't take back, Pat.
Well, I love me some Skip. Skip's my guy. Tune into him every morning. Sports yelling is my favorite kind of TV.
You watch Skip Bayless every morning. I'll probably get in trouble for talking about this, but you really watch Skip Bayless every morning, or are you being sarcastic?
I watch like 6 minutes of it, like when I wake up. Well, not when
just
I wake
to get
up, like,
pumped up.
Yeah, listen, there's a vibe and an energy I really appreciate about stuff like that. It's performative art, and I really like it. Like, when I yell at my guests, I mean, I'm not angry all of the time, but sometimes it's fun to yell. And sometimes people like to watch other people yell at people.
Are you angry when you yell at Tim Andercust? For
Yes.
people who don't know, Tim, is it Tim Anderson?
Yes.
Tim. But he's like, sorry, go ahead. If you watch Pat's show, Tim is Dr. Tim Andercust, who's neither a real doctor.
Oh, he's a real doctor.
Oh, he is?
Yeah.
What kind of doctor is he?
Political theory or something.
Oh, okay. He's not like operating on anybody. I mean,
no, he once told me that he wanted to be into a situation where if on a plane someone said, "Is there a doctor on board?" that he could say yes, but not that type.
So it's hard to you have to see these shows with Cuss because the guy is insane. Like the takes that he has are, and so my boss EK wanted to know, what is the most insane Tim Anderson take that you've ever seen? Because and he has this ability to jinx anything. Like if he's like, this is going to happen, it's just that the opposite of that is going to happen.
Yeah, we're actually next Monday, we are recording the 3rd annual Custy Awards, where we go over the worst calls he's made all year. And there's so many, it's mind-boggling. And that always happens, like when he was victory lapping La La Land, winning Best Picture at the Oscars. And then it got taken away from him. It was minus 10,000 at the time. Like, that's probably the biggest one. Him victory lapping Spieth at the Masters, then double dunk in the water. We won all the Danny Willett money. It was glorious. His worst take ever. He says he could hit .050, so hit 50, not 500, but 50 in Major League Baseball. Now, this is a guy who hits like 100 in mixed league slow pitch.
He thinks he could bat 500 in Major League Baseball?
No, not 500.
.050.
So one hit in every 20 at-bats.
Yeah, that's the worst take. That's like the guy for the Eagles beat guy who's like, I could luck into a home run, but I'd never score a goal in hockey. It's like, you think you're lucking into a home run with a wooden baseball bat against Major League pitching?
Wait, have you ever seen hockey? Like, listen, if you were on the ice in hockey, just stand in front of the net. People can take slap shots at you. It bounces off you. It goes in. Like, right. It's not going to happen, but it's possible.
If you're lucking into something, it's going to be a hockey goal. It's not going to be like magically swinging a bat. Like, do you think you are like the natural here? You're not going to like break lights by actually smoking one over them. I mean, it's ridiculous. Batting .050 as an average human being is not happening.
What if you're a significantly below average human being? What happens
mean,
then? So I told him that he wouldn't make contact in 600 at bats. And then I bet him that with me pitching, now I tore my labrum in high school, so I can't hit in the 80s anymore. But I've worked it back up to the point where, like, I'm in my mid 30s now. I can still chuck at like 71, 72. I was like, I don't know if you would make contact off of me at this point. So
no.
We're going to have that. Probably the next time I see him is going to be Christmas, so that's going to be tough. Next summer, we're going to go out. I'm going to rehab my shoulder a little bit more to make sure I'm coming with fire for at least 40 pitches or so. See if you can make contact.
And you just K's for like 35 times.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll get you out of here on this. Give you some sleepers that you're sort of eyeing for the 2020 season. It can be any position, can be any round. Like if you think Kenny Golladay is a first round pick or worthy of a first round pick next year at this time, as a third round pick now, that can count. So anything in that realm works.
I mean, besides all like the 100 people I've mentioned so far, but A is Mclaurin. I'm getting Mclaurin everywhere.
Okay.
He's going in like the 4th round right now, maybe 5th round, depending on the draft that you're doing. I think the best way to assess, because some people are like, well, you can't draft him here because his average draft position is 3 rounds later. Sometimes you want a guy, you go take a guy. I'm totally on board with that. But I always think that understanding average draft position, and like no matter where you play, like if you draft on CBS, you go to the CBS, you open up, like doing a mock draft, the drafting part doesn't really make a difference because mock drafts no one takes seriously. But what is serious is learning the system that you're playing. So if you use CBS, it defaults to CBS rankings. So what are people inherently going to do? Look over at the list and see who the highest guy is, and they'll probably take that. So step 1, just scroll through the list and like have someone's rankings. If you use mine, you're probably going to lose. So find someone better ranking than me. Go use Jesse's. I'm sure that his are fantastic. But at the same time, scroll through them and just see the players that don't line up with the actual system. That's the best way to actually find sleepers, because you can call anyone a sleeper. You go to any site, any analyst, they're going to have every single person in the league is a sleeper, apparently. There's guys that you can really like, and you want to make sure that you draft on the systems where they have those players undervalued, and then you can get them.
Right. No, I mean, and look, in CBS is a lot of people don't know this. I don't think I've ever mentioned it on the podcast, but I do this all the time. So when you go to CBS, the draft room, it defaults to projections, which are powered by our Sportsline computer model, which creates these projections. Now, I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong. But they're totally different than if you switch it up and adjust by expert average rank.
Yeah, so take Azer's ranks, for example, and just put them up against projections. They're going to be different because projections
wildly
are
different
rankings.
Yeah, you can even sort by ADP, which is not how these are sorted in the draft room. And so if you do that, you're going to have guys that are like projected lower, but you might like better that pop up a little bit higher. So I would agree with that. I think that's almost a better way to handle sleepers in 2020 than to say, because you're right, everybody's a sleeper. Like who's not a sleeper?
People know things now, too. This isn't 2006 anymore where you had to go get a magazine. So if some guy got better in training camp, the people who had the magazine just never heard of this guy before. So, like, that doesn't exist. So, like I said, I think you should go with the strategy. I like these mid-tier receivers. Like I said, Woods, Thielen, McLaurin, and Chark. I think all those guys, you get 2 of those guys, 3 of those guys. That could be your core if you wanted to. And James Conner in, like, round 4, round 5. And all those other running backs I talked about, the Chase Edmonds, Latavius Murray, Damien Harris, DeAndre Washington, like pick up 2 of those guys. We don't know how the injury situation is going to play out. And the last thing to hammer home on this is that I'm not big on zero RB because I think you should get a stud running back just because it's so hard to find one. But if there's ever a year where you're going to find one, it's going to be this year because of so many injury unknowns, health unknowns, what's going to happen to these guys in a bubble. But the other thing about zero RB of why it makes sense and why taking handcuffs makes sense versus doing it the other way with other positions is if Alvin Kamara gets hurt, Latavius Murray is now the starter. You sub in one. Is he as good as Alvin Kamara? No, he's not. But he's 85% fantasy as good as Alvin Kamara, so it doesn't really make a difference. If Michael Thomas gets hurt, that doesn't make Emmanuel Sanders the best wide receiver in football. Those targets go everywhere. We don't know where they're going. At least at running back, you can draw a straight line in a lot of situations of where the actual help is going to come from. That's what makes it a more viable strategy than just saying, oh, I'm going to take backup receivers, which doesn't make any sense.
No, and look, I think to marry that home to what you said at the beginning of the show too is it's really important. You can't go in saying I'm going to do this and this is going to happen, because that's not, my old Mike Tyson line. Like, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. And then your draft goes sideways and you have to figure out, like, you need to go in saying, I'm going to get the best players. This is sort of my approach. We'll see how it works out. And then you adjust accordingly. And even then, you should still make sure that you go out and you get like these flyers at running back. That's how Alvin Kamara won people leagues. David Johnson won people leagues, because they were drafted as flyers, as rookie running backs, and eventually stepped into the starting role and got to get a ton of run once somebody else got cleared out of the way.
Yeah, it's how Liddell Betts won me a fantasy championship in 2011.
Oh, God bless Liddell Betts. That's how Jamal Charles and Sean McCoy, they won me titles.
Larry Johnson did the exact same thing the year he broke out. He was behind Priest Holmes.
Yeah. But do you remember when that was, like, when people didn't know things? It was kind of
great. I was much better at fantasy then.
It's way better. I won my league like 3 years in a row. Now I can't, like, even make the playoffs because everybody knows anything and they get to mock me because I do this for a living. It's like, well, you know what? Go after yourselves.
Yeah, you know what? They can mock you for doing it for a living, but you still get paid to watch the sports. They have to go to their real jobs and do this as a side gig.
Right. So you got to talk to your families on Sundays, losers. All right, Pat Mayo, Mayo Media Network. The logo is delightful. It is funny. So our boss EK loves your program, but he hates actual mayonnaise. So the Twitter handle for Mayo Media Network is sort of a Sophie's choice for him.
Yeah, I'm not big on mayonnaise either, but I felt like since it's my name, I had to tie it in just a little bit. And I am not above shameless self-promotion either. Like, my name of my old show when I was on TV was the Pat Mayo Hour before it became the Pat Mayo Experience. It was Pat Mayo Experience, changed the name, changed it back. So I think Joe Rogan stole it from me since I've had the show longer. So I'm just saying, because I stole it from The Simpsons. Either way.
EK wants to know if you've ever asked. No, this is for Debo says, EK wants to know if you've ever thought about changing your name, changing the Mayo part, but I don't see why you would. It's very distinctive.
It's a very catchy name, Pat Mayo. It's easy to remember. Most people call me Mayo in real life, so that would be tough. It's short. It's quick. It's to the point. We can move on, and it sticks in people's minds because it's weird. At the same time, just having, when I was on TV, I was like, I don't want to be a shameless self-promoter, but having my name in the title means when you're scrolling the guide, my name comes up all the time. And people like legit know me because of that. Like, sometimes you got to look out for you in these things. Work your name in. It should be the Pick Six Will Brinson podcast.
In hindsight, yes, that was a mistake on my part not to demand my name be in there. But you know what? What are you going to do? All right, go subscribe to Pat Mayo. If you listen to the show, you like the show, you like good content, go do me a favor and subscribe to Pat Mayo's YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe to ours too. Pat, appreciate the time, buddy. Always good to talk to you.
Don't forget the audio. Don't forget the audio podcast. People listen to this show, Will. I need to reach the people. Pat Mayo Experience, Apple, Stitcher, Anchor, Spotify, wherever. Daily show. And it's not just good information, because it's not, but it's fun to listen to.
It is extremely enjoyable to listen to. If you're getting into DFS, I highly recommend it. Or just, if you like good content, go check it out. Pat, good promotion. Good show. Thanks, buddy.
All right, man. Thank you.